Tell me why the whole time I thought Liam Hemsworth was PETA. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. And if you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Yates Anya Buile, Steph Anya for short, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Today, I'm going to finally be sharing my thoughts on the Hunger Games. If you're curious, stay tuned. What's on your mind? I want to take a minute to thank today's sponsor, which is Luisa. Luisa is actually one of the first brands that I've ever worked with on this channel, and I'm really glad that I did because now I can talk about the quality of their pieces. A lot of their pieces I've had for well over 4 years now. I have never had an Luisa piece tarnish, and I keep my jewelry in the bathroom where I take showers. There's a ton of humidity, and I have never seen a piece tarnish. And the great thing is there's no compromise because even though the quality is amazing, they have pieces that start at $39. And honestly, I've never been the type of person that really invests in jewelry because I lose it. Unfortunately, the pieces I no longer have anymore is because I've gone on trips and left them there. But I just cannot travel without their pieces. So it's an inevitable thing. I've lost at least 3 pieces just due to wearing them so much. But at the price point that they have their jewelry at on the website, as well as the quality of their pieces, it's one of those things where if you're wanting to make an investment and elevate your style, this is a great way to go, especially looking forward to styling my pieces in the fall. I love having dainty little pieces to kind of counteract chunky knitted sweater or sweatshirt. I absolutely love wearing their pieces. People compliment me on them all the time and ask where I get them from. And so this is a small way that I like to take care of myself and I feel my best. If you're wanting to try Ana Luisa out for yourself, use the link in my description box and you'll get 30% off of your order. Now let's get back into the video. This is gonna be a bit chatty, so make sure you look at the chapters in the description box. I've got to share a little bit of why this is the first time I'm watching and reading the Hunger Games. A lot of you were here with me last year when I did the Twilight series. If you haven't seen those videos, you might be interested in them if you like this type of content. And back then in high school, I was so loyal. If I loved something, I did not want to cheat on it with anything that people were comparing it to. Back then, a lot of people were making comparisons between Twilight and the Hunger Games and saying that the Hunger Games was so much better. So I was like, I'm not gonna ever watch the Hunger Games. Over the years, people would bring up the Hunger Games and they said, this would be a great thing for you to review. I do listen to your suggestions. And so we actually read the Hunger Games in the book club at the end of last year. And so when I started reading the book, I was like, oh, this is excellent. So I went through all of the books. I read all the way up until the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I cannot wait to talk about, without ever seeing the movie. With Hunger Games being such a huge phenomenon, of course, I had an idea about the cast, but I hadn't seen the movies. Of course, I knew Jennifer Lawrence was in it. I knew Liam Hemsworth was in it, Elizabeth Banks, Woody Harrelson. I knew these people were in it. I didn't know their exact roles, but for the most part, you could kind of figure out based on images you've seen or trailers you've seen. I knew Lenny Kravitz was in it. I figured he was probably Senna. One huge thing that I got wrong is that the whole time I thought that Liam Hemsworth played PETA. Every time I talk about this, people are like, well, Liam Hemsworth is like buff. And yeah, in my mind, he didn't look like that. In my mind, he looked more like how he looked in the last song. Lanky, tall, all of that to say that watching the movies after reading the books has just really sent me down such a mental spiral because getting those two actors confused totally changed my experience. I had to get a little bit of that backstory, but after reading and watching, the book was 5 stars for me. It's on my 5-star favorite shelf. I loved it so much. And I'm going to today talk about the characters as I typically do, what they would look like for me as clients. And I'll also talk about some of the relational dynamics that remind me of what it's like being in session with relationships that we see portrayed in this film. So of course we have to start with our lead, Katniss. First thing to say, somebody like Katniss is not likely to be in therapy. When we talk about the types of people in therapy, in solution-focused therapy, which is a branch of systemic therapy, the concept of identifying the type of client that you're working with, especially when you're working with the family, because you'll have people who are there and engaged at different levels. You have the customer, the complainant, and the visitor. Your customer is the person who is there and is engaged and ready to learn, take accountability, make changes. They are ready to see a change and they're ready to incorporate therapy into that change. Your visitor is a person who's just there, maybe like they've been dragged there for some reason, they're involuntarily there, or they're just curious, but they really aren't interested in making a change. A complainant recognizes that a change should be made, but they think it's everybody else. They don't take accountability. They're looking around and thinking about how everybody else needs to change. Katniss would fall more into that visitor category. If she was in therapy, it would be because it is mandated in some form. Somebody she loves has given her an ultimatum, someone has told her she needs help, or maybe she recognizes that she needs help, but she's just so uncomfortable with opening up that she's not really engaged in the process or committed to the process of therapy. So it's rare that I get a client like Katniss unless they're coming in, for example, as one of the partners of a couple where you've got one person who really wants to be in therapy and one person who is just there because their partner said they have to be there. But if Katniss was to come into session, these are definitely some of the first things I would notice. If you're here from the Twilight videos, there's going to be some overlap we see between Katniss and Bella, but I think that Katniss is a much more developed character. So Katniss also, just as we talked about with Bella, is a parentified child, but this happens with Katniss in such an extreme case. When we talk about Bella being parentified, it's because her parents got a divorce, her mom's a little bit harebrained, so she takes on responsibility as a way of maintaining some semblance of control. Katniss actually has a more solid anchor that explains her parentification, which is her mother experiencing a devastating loss, their whole family unit losing Katniss's father, and Katniss ended up having to pick up the pieces. You already have one parent who has passed away, and then another parent who is no longer engaging in life and care, and Katniss has a little sister that needs to be taken care of. So she by default moves into this role of becoming a parent to both her sister and to her mom. I'll never forget Katniss volunteers to become a tribute for Prim, and she says to her mom, "You can't keep falling apart. It cannot be like how it was when Dad passed away."
No, you can't. Not like when Dad died. I won't be there anymore. You're all she has. No matter what you feel, you have to be there for her. Do you understand?
I am not here to take care of her, and you have to step up and take care of her. So in that moment, she is parenting her mother. She's parenting her on her parenting. Katniss's mother is also the type of person that I don't see in therapy as often because, as you can see, she does not take responsibility for things. So that lack of responsibility also often leads to a lack of accountability. She reminds me of the types of parents we read about in one of the books we read about in the book club called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Katniss's mother is an emotionally immature parent because in dealing with understandable grief and devastation, she had difficulty prioritizing her children. And I do feel empathy for her as a human being, just having difficulty reintegrating into life after experiencing that loss. But the person who would normally come to me as the client is Prim, right? Prim would be the person who comes to me and talks about losing her father at a young age, watching her mother mentally deteriorate, and watching her sister step up and feeling a sense of guilt of all the sacrifices that her sister had to make for her. That is the person that would typically come to me as a customer and be engaged in trying to figure out what she can do differently. So a lot of times my clients are the people who probably need to change the least, but they feel the most weight and burden of all of the pressure and pain that their family members or loved ones are in a way imparting on them. Kids like Katniss and Prim end up growing up and typically being pretty successful. And that is because they learned how to be self-sufficient. They learned that their parents would not be there for them. So they learned how to manage as much as they can on their own. They want to be as little trouble as possible for their parents. And it ends up creating an environment where they have difficulty identifying and definitely advocating for their own needs because they are so accustomed to the self-sacrifice that comes from needing as little as possible from your parents. When we talk about relational factors, Katniss's mother's relationship to her is what I would consider to be dependent enmeshment, in that she is taking on the role of being a victim and Katniss is taking on the role of being a rescuer. She's saving her. She's risking her life to make sure that they eat. She's doing what she can to be a parent to Prim, and her mother has resigned into that role. And this is something that I see with clients, something that I've seen in my personal life, is that after a certain point, when a child shows that they can be not only self-sufficient, but also provide for the family at large, that the parent's role continuously diminishes because they are giving more and more responsibility to that child. So Katniss's mother has developed a dependent relationship onto Katniss, and Katniss has assumed the role and taken on the identity of being so self-sufficient that we see it contributes to her moments of downfall when she refuses to accept need or recognize when she can get support from other people. There are 4 types of emotionally immature parents. I go into more detail on that in the book club live that we did about this book, but Katniss's mother falls into the role of being a passive parent, meaning that she is avoiding things that are upsetting. She has detached herself from the real world and their surroundings are upsetting. They're living in a dystopian society where food is scarce, joy is scarce, and Katniss's mother has lost the strength to survive after losing her husband. She's become very passive, and it begs the question, what happens when Katniss is no longer there to take on the roles that she has passively rejected? Katniss can't fully trust that now that she's going to be a tribute, that her mother will take care of her sister. So let's talk about how these dynamics impact Katniss, because what's wonderful about Suzanne Collins' writing is that her characters are realistic. Even though Katniss is our heroine, she's still very frustrating at times. And I think one of the biggest elements of frustration for me reading about Katniss and watching Katniss in the movie, she has such self-deprecation, but that is typical when you see a child being raised by a parent who forces them to essentially suppress their own needs in favor of the needs of the family. This typically contributes to a sense of emotional loneliness. So even if she's surrounded by her family, who does Katniss really have emotional intimacy with? She has Gale as a friend, but their relationship is very active. It's not very emotional. They talk about escaping, they talk about providing for their families, but both of them have taken on the responsibility of being the providers for their family. They are not there to sit around, talk about their feelings, talk about their grief, talk about their pain. They have some conversations along those lines, but not very in depth. So when you have children who are raised with this sense of emotional loneliness, and you have to think, I believe that based on the way that Katniss describes her relationship with her father, she's in a worse position because you have some people who've never experienced what it's like to have emotional fulfillment. And in those situations, it is something you can't necessarily miss because you never had it. I believe that when Katniss's father was alive, she had more space for emotional processing because she wasn't so worried about her family's survival. Even though obviously people in most districts, particularly in District 12, had to struggle to survive, when Katniss's father was alive, she wasn't the person primarily responsible for making sure that her family did survive. So she had more mental energy and space to process her feelings. There was probably less for her to process than what she had to process after losing losing her father. So when we have people who are dealing with emotional loneliness, they typically subconsciously and sometimes overtly feel that they have to change. They would have to be a totally different person for someone to love them unconditionally and want to be with them. And that's why we see Katniss being so delusional about how Peeta feels about her. She cannot accept that someone would want to be with her, especially before she was ever doing anything for them. That idea of unconditional positive regard, someone who sees the best in you and you haven't done anything for them, that is foreign to her because she has now had many years under her belt of essentially earning her place in her family and inadvertently earning love. So everything with Peeta seems strategic. Throughout the book, it's so frustrating and annoying to read how Katniss looks at Peeta. She's always talking about how he plays the game so well. He's so much better at it than her. He's great at pretending like they're in love. He's great at pretending like they're great friends. She believes that he is the great pretender. He's an amazing actor and very strategic player. And it's not until much later on that she considers the possibility that he might actually be in love with her. And I love that scene that she has in the book when she's talking with Haymitch, and he's basically instructing her on how to talk about Peeta, how to make it seem as though she's in love with him. And then she's like, did you have this conversation with Peeta as well? And he's walking off like he's already there. You don't have to worry about that. He doesn't need any coaching on that. Even though those kind of traits can be very frustrating because it's like, girl, he's obviously in love with you. It makes sense when you take into context the type of household that she's been raised in and what her role looks like in that family. Prim gets unconditional love, but she needs to earn her place in that family. Her focus is not on love, her focus is on survival. Due to emotional loneliness, Katniss not only doesn't express her emotions, she's also uncomfortable with emotions, right? We see that in the movie and we definitely see that in the book. One scene that we can point to is where Katniss's family, her mom and sister, and Gale come to tell her goodbye. Of course, there are tears. She's like, don't you cry, I'm fine. Again, self-sacrificing. Instead of taking those moments to say, I'm scared. I love you. I hope I can see you again. She's saying instead, I'm fine. Don't have this big emotional reaction to this. I'm going to take care of it as I always do. And so that is Katniss missing out on an opportunity to get the emotional support that she needs. But she's not comfortable with emotions. She suppresses them and in a way refutes them. When it comes to Peeta's feelings towards her, she'll flat out deny them. In the book, The Origins of You, Vienna Ferrone talks about the wounds we experience in childhood. And I think that the biggest wound that Katniss experienced is a safety wound. First, just living in District 12, you're not guaranteed safety at all. Then to see your father go into work in a coal mine, see that coal mine go up in flames and your father being a part of that explosion. Then to have one parent left who unfortunately emotionally disengages and no longer is able to protect and provide for you and your little sister. Katniss hasn't known safety for a very long time. Katniss arguably has never experienced safety. And then with the Hunger Games, the fear of your name being called, and then for her sister's name to be called, Katniss has absolutely never known safety. Katniss makes money by doing illegal things, risking her life every day to feed her family. She has never experienced safety. She lives in probably the most unstable, unsafe environment that she possibly could. And so that safety wound contributes to her constantly being on guard, her having those walls up, those defense mechanisms. It's not only difficult for Katniss to trust people, but I don't think it's welcome. She doesn't want to trust people. She doesn't want to connect with people because what she's learned from losing her father is that it doesn't matter how much you love someone, it doesn't matter how much you care about someone. They can be taken from you like that. So we've got the abandonment also contributing to a lack of safety. So this puts Katniss always on guard and she lashes out about things that it feels like, why would you get so mad about that? I think about the scene where Peeta announces that he has this unrequited love for her and she's like, what the heck was that? And literally pins him up against a wall. She's lashing out because she's like, what angle are you playing here? I don't even think she even knows why she's mad. The only thing she knows is that someone seems to be using her as a part of a narrative that she didn't agree to, and it feels dangerous, and she feels an immediate need to protect herself. And all of this is before you even make it to the games. So imagine what that heightened sense of you're never safe does for a person like Katniss, who's absolutely never experienced safety. But I also think it gave her an advantage, because Katniss constantly being in survival mode taught her the skills that she needed to be able to maintain a low profile and do what needs to be done to survive. If she can do that, then she can ensure that Prim will be able to eat, because she doesn't know that her mother will be able to do that for her. Katniss is an internalizer. She became as easy as possible and therefore became easy to neglect. These sorts of people are self-sacrificers. In situations that would make other people panic, because they're internalizers, you don't see that from them. They're always going straight to strategy and solution finding. But as we said earlier, the difficulty here is that when they need help, that is much more difficult for them to communicate. And when they need to take actions to preserve their own self instead of others, that is also not an inherent thought or action. So we see Katniss even doing that in the games when it comes to Rue and when it comes to Peeta. In order to shed light on the fact that Rue is a human being and someone whose life was taken, Katniss risked it all by honoring Rue after her passing. Once Katniss is there with Peeta, he begs her, please don't go to get the medicine for me. And in the book, Katniss actually drugs Peeta. Haymitch sends her a small vial of sleep syrup so that Peeta will stay asleep and she can go and get the medicine that he needs to heal his wounds. So once again, Peeta begged her, do not go. And she's being so self-sacrificing that she's willing to go in with no protection, no cover, just so that Peeta has a chance to heal and survive. And this is not something that she's doing strategically. This is something she's doing in a self-sacrificing way that has become her way, because that's the only way that she knows how to care for her loved ones, is at the cost of her own survival. Katniss would absolutely sacrifice herself for anyone that she loves, which is praised in the media. But I'm curious, do you all think that that is a great quality? I think that we're in a balance today of talking on one hand about taking care of ourselves, but on the other hand, we really do look at people as self-centered if they don't prioritize others over their self. So I'm curious about if you guys think that that is a good quality to have, and I know it's not an easy thing to answer. So this video is already running really long, but there's so many characters that are well written in this story. I want to know from you, who do you want me to talk about next? What do you want me to talk about next? I don't think I'll be able to do this as simple as just talking about the Hunger Games, then Mockingjay. I'll probably have to talk about it at a character specific level. So you guys let me know your questions, and I might even do just a video that's kind of more of a Q&A format to either answer your questions or even comment on some of your own thoughts about characters in this story. So glad that I finally read it and watched it, and I'm actually waiting to watch the Mockingjay movie until I have an idea about the direction that you all want me to take these videos. Would you like to see me kind of blind react to it? There's so many different options for how to go through this series. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thanks again to Ana Luisa for sponsoring a portion of today's video. If you'd like to try out Ana Luisa's pieces for yourself, please click the link in my description box for 30% off of your order. Please like this video, share this video, subscribe to my channel. I appreciate you so much for watching until the end of the video. You didn't have to, but the fact that you did actually helps me out a lot. So thank you, thank you, thank you.